Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. When I was in college about 5 years ago, I worked for my university as a resident advisor in a dorm. It was a student job that provided me with free housing in exchange for managing a floor in one of the student housing buildings on campus. The job itself was fairly basic and consisted of helping students with housing issues, maintaining office hours Monday to Friday, having a duty weekend once a month, and enforcing university policies. While I initially took the position for the housing perk, the dorm community aspect ended up being quite enjoyable. Most of the university housing policies were common sense. No loud music after 10 p.m., no running in the building, and so on. If someone was found breaking the rules, you would tell them to stop and document it in case the issue became habitual. Some rule infractions also came with fines, such as smoking inside or damaging physical property. One of the policies that had a fine attached was getting locked out of your dorm. If you needed to be let back into your dorm, the university would fine you $50, and if you actually lost your key, you would be charged $750 to re-core the door lock. During my first year as an RA, I never charged a student to get back into their dorm. I thought it was a bad policy because, being a poor student myself, I understood what $50 could mean to someone. The building's resident manager, my boss at that time, was about to graduate and didn't care if we charged them to get into their room, so everything was good. However, in year 2, I had my first meeting with the other RAs and our new RM, whom we'll call Alex. Alex was one of those people who was immediately overly friendly and, because he considered himself a friend, felt like he could invade your personal space. He would do things like touch your shoulders or arms while talking to you. It was in this first meeting that he assigned all the master keys for the building. He had 2 keys for each floor, which were inside a zipper binder along with a key log consisting of the key's serial number and the RA it was assigned to. This detail would become important later. He gave us each one of the keys and then placed the second on a duty set of keys, which were checked out on the weekend by the pair of RAs on duty. While the university policies for a student losing a key were bad, the policies for an RA losing a master key were worse. If you were to lose a master key, you would be terminated, thus losing your housing, and you would be fined the cost to re-core each door on your floor $18,000. While we all already knew this, I recall how much time Alex specifically spent reiterating this fact to us in this first meeting, and how he was no longer responsible for the keys since we now had them. Several weeks into the semester, I was conducting duty rounds in the building with another RA whom I was friends with. We'll call her Sophie. Sophie was very smart, assertive, and always good for a laugh, so I loved working duty with her. This day, however, Sophie seemed a bit down. After a bit of prodding, she confided in me that Alex had been making her uncomfortable and that he kept touching her. I thought I understood what she meant because I also disliked how touchy he was and how close he would get to me when we spoke. That's not what she meant. "It's not just the casual touching," Sophie explained, her voice low. "He cornered me in the office the other day and tried to hug me. When I pushed him away, he laughed it off like it was a joke. I was shocked." "Sophie, that's serious. Have you thought about reporting him?" She shook her head. "I don't want to. You know Alex is one of the department's golden boys. Who would believe me over him?" I talked to her about reporting him, but she didn't want to. Sophie said she had had enough, so she told him off and didn't think it would happen again, but asked me to stick around her anytime he was around. After learning what Sophie told me, I asked another female RA who I was friends with what she thought of Alex. While she didn't claim he had done anything to her, she did express that she didn't like being alone with him. "There's just something off about him," she said, shuddering slightly. "I always make sure there's someone else around when I have to talk to him." I decided he was a creep, and I became very brief anytime I had to speak with him. I also made sure I would stick around after staff meetings until everyone left and would linger in the office doorway if Alex called one of the girls back. The year went on, and I continued doing my job just as I had the year before. I documented major and minor incidents, but I never documented letting students back into their dorms. One weekend, I was on duty and got a notification on the duty phone from a student. I called them, and they were locked out on another floor. I grabbed the duty set keys and headed to let them back into their dorm. In the hallway, I ran into Alex, who asked what I was doing. "Hey, what's up?" Alex said, his usual overly friendly smile in place. "Where are you off to in such a hurry?" "Just letting a student into their room," I replied curtly, trying to move past him. "Oh, make sure you charge them the fee," he called after me. I didn't respond and continued on my way, thinking nothing of it. The following Monday, I was called into the office. I was asked about the student I let into their room and how often I had to let people in. I was honest and told him that I never charged the students and I did it several times a month. Apparently, because the students are informed of the policy and their responsibilities when they accept the keys, he considered my failure to charge them to be theft from the university. He had apparently reviewed all of the reports submitted under my user ID and seen that I had never charged anyone for being let back into their dorm and told me that he was referring me for disciplinary action. The disciplinary action did not go far, or at least no one higher up ever spoke to me about that situation. For me, though, this drew a line that only served to reinforce my opinion of him. School continued much as it had. A few months before the end of the year, I was again doing duty rounds with Sophie, who was clearly upset. Apparently, a few nights prior, she had a late night and a few drinks with friends. Early the next morning, a student had awoken her from her drunken stupor because they had locked themselves out of their dorm. Still half asleep, she grabbed her master key and let the student in. When she returned to her room, instead of putting the key up, she had set it on her counter where it then fell into the trash. Awake the next day and not realizing what had happened, she took her trash to the dumpster, and it was gone to the dump before she remembered what happened. Sophie couldn't afford to lose her job, housing, and being fined $18,000. She was at a complete loss as to what to do. "I can't believe this happened," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "What am I going to do? I can't lose everything over this stupid mistake." After considering the consequences of reporting what had happened and deciding that was a bad course of action, we brainstormed and decided that we needed to find a way to make a new key without anyone knowing. We didn't have long to act either, as each day ran the risk of a random key check by Alex. The university keys were made on a key blank that was not readily available at local shops, presumably for this exact reason. So we scoured the internet looking for a copy and ended up finding one that looked like a match. However, the website's picture was just a silhouette of what the key's outline looked like, so we weren't 100% sure. It was our best option, so we ordered it. A plan was born. With our key blank en route, we decided that we would take the second master key on the duty set midweek, when it's not being used, and take it somewhere to make a copy. The next problem was, once we had a working copy of the key, we would still need to find a way to get the key's serial number back on the copy. Luckily, Sophie knew someone with hammer stamps we could use to imprint the numbers on the key, and I somehow remembered the binder that Alex had with the serial numbers. Because Alex's office was across the hall from his room, he could always hear if anyone was in there. Since Sophie had bad experiences with Alex, we didn't want him to find her in there alone, so it fell to me. I waited until night on one of my duty weekends and got into the office. I opened the door as quietly as I could and snuck in, leaving the door only slightly ajar so that no one in the hall could immediately see in. I was only halfway through looking for the binder when I heard his door open. Sure enough, Alex stepped in and asked what I was doing. "Oh, hey, Alex," I said, trying to sound casual despite my racing heart. "My laptop's not working, so I had to use the university computer to file an incident report." The lie was good enough, and he bought it, leaving me alone to continue my search. It only took a few minutes before I found the binder and got the key number assigned to Sophie. I went ahead and filed a bogus report on a minor infraction in case Alex checked and was out of there. Each day we waited to see if the key blank would arrive. The plan hinged on this key, and it was exhilarating feeling the plan beginning to come together. When it finally came, it was a perfect match except for the large key brand stamped across it. There wasn't a way to cover it up, and it was too noticeable to pass as a real key. The whole plan seemed to fall apart. We decided we would still make a copy on this branded blank so that if Sophie needed to use the key, she could do so without being discovered not having her master key. Sophie waited until midweek and took the second master key off of the duty set to use to make a copy. Once she had it, we talked over the plan and joked about how nice it would be if we could just change the numbers on the second key to match the serial number of the first. While that seemed like it probably wouldn't work, we decided to look at how many numbers would have to be changed. It was 0. In our first meeting where Alex had assigned us keys, where he stressed how we would be fired if we lost these keys, he had accidentally issued Sophie his copy. We realized we didn't have to do anything else, and Sophie put her master key in her lockbox. After 2 weeks, no one had noticed that the duty set was missing a key. Because we were tired of waiting, we had a student pretend to get locked out while Sophie was in town. The responding RA didn't have a clue and was confused why none of the keys worked, and they called up Alex. Alex couldn't seem to get any of the keys to work either, so he called Sophie back to the dorm so that he could use her master key, a task in which she was happy to assist. When everyone realized a master key was missing, the big bosses got involved. There was a complete building search, a search of dorm rooms, and multiple interviews of each RA. None of the RAs knew anything but Sophie and I, so we feigned ignorance along with everyone else. I believe they suspected Sophie initially, but when she was able to produce her correct master key, their demeanor with her drastically changed. The floor got re-cored as you would expect. They never did figure out where that key had gone and thus couldn't justifiably charge anyone for the incident. We had a meeting where they basically chewed all of us out about keys and the importance of their security. While the meeting was for us all, a heavy emphasis was clearly directed towards Alex. Apparently, as part of his position, he was required to complete a key log each day to make sure that the keys on the duty set were accounted for. Unfortunately, he had not been doing so, and there was no way to tell how long the key had been missing. Like he had told me when he wrote me up, this was important since those keys were assigned to him, and he had been informed of the policy and his responsibilities when he accepted the keys. Since he was the boss's golden boy, they didn't fire him like we were all warned would happen. Alex did end up getting a substantial fine, and while I don't know the exact amount, I do know he was incredibly upset about it. The year was almost over, and Alex got moved to another building the next year, so I never had much more to do with him. I do know that he ended up losing his job due to some incident involving another female RA. Well, that was longer than I expected. Hopefully it's worth a laugh for anyone who actually read it, and at least I have it written down now. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd end up in court over my grandpa's old Chevy, but here I was, facing off against the neighborhood busybody in small claims court. It all started a few months back when my grandpa passed away. He left me his pride and joy, a 1967 Chevrolet Impala that he'd lovingly restored over the years. The car wasn't in perfect shape, but it ran well and had a ton of sentimental value. Grandpa and I had spent countless weekends tinkering with that old Chevy, and now it was mine to care for. The only issue was that I lived in an apartment with limited parking, so I arranged to keep the Impala parked in front of my parents' house a few blocks away. That's where the trouble started. My parents live in one of those neighborhoods with an overzealous homeowners association run by none other than Karen, a busybody in her 50s with a bad dye job and an even worse attitude. From day one, she took issue with that eyesore parked on the street. "You can't keep that junk heap here," Karen informed me snippily one afternoon as I was washing the Impala. "It's an eyesore and it's lowering property values." I tried explaining that the car was properly registered and insured and that street parking was perfectly legal. But Karen wasn't having it. "I don't care if it's legal. It doesn't meet homeowner association standards," she huffed. "Get rid of it or face fines." I stood my ground and refused to move the car. It was legally parked and I had every right to keep it there. Karen stomped off in a huff, but I knew this wasn't the end of it. Sure enough, a few days later, I got a letter from the homeowner association informing me that I was in violation of neighborhood standards and would be fined $100 per day until the derelict vehicle was removed. I called up the homeowner association office and patiently explained, once again, that the car was not derelict, was fully operational, and was parked legally on a public street. The office worker sounded sympathetic but said Karen was insisting on enforcing the rule. At this point, I decided to get some legal advice. I met with a lawyer who specialized in homeowner association disputes, and she confirmed that the homeowner association had no authority over public street parking. She drafted a strongly worded letter informing them that their fines were illegal and unenforceable. I thought that would be the end of it, but Karen wasn't about to give up so easily. A week later, I got served with papers. Karen was suing me in small claims court, claiming that the Impala actually belonged to her late husband and that I had somehow stolen it. I was floored. This was a blatant lie. My grandpa had owned that car for decades. I had the title and registration paperwork to prove it, but now I had to go to court to defend myself against this crazy claim. The day of the hearing arrived, and I showed up armed with all my documentation: the car's title, registration, insurance papers, even old photos of my grandpa with the car going back years. Karen swanned in looking smug, towing along some poor schmuck she'd roped in as a witness. The judge called us up to present our cases. Karen went first, spinning some wild tale about how her late husband had owned a '67 Impala just like mine, and how it had mysteriously vanished shortly before his death. She claimed she'd recognize that car anywhere, and accused me of somehow stealing it. Her witness nervously backed up her story, though he looked mighty uncomfortable doing so. When it was my turn, I calmly presented all my documentation showing my grandpa's long-time ownership of the car. I had the title with his name on it, decades of registration paperwork, and even childhood photos of me helping wash the Impala. The judge looked it all over carefully. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "do you have any documentation showing your late husband's ownership of this vehicle? A title, registration, anything?" Karen hemmed and hawed, claiming the paperwork must have been lost when her husband died. The judge wasn't buying it. "Young man," he said to me, "your documentation clearly shows your grandfather's ownership of this vehicle going back many years. The title is in his name and was properly transferred to you upon his death. I see no evidence to support the plaintiff's claim." He ruled in my favor, dismissing Karen's bogus lawsuit. As we left the courtroom, I couldn't resist a little gloating. "Hey Karen," I called out, "how about from now on you mind your own business and leave my car alone?" She glared daggers at me but said nothing as she stormed off. I headed home feeling vindicated, looking forward to taking my grandpa's beloved Chevy for a victory drive. But the saga wasn't quite over. A few days later, I came out to find the Impala covered in eggs and toilet paper. I had a pretty good idea who was behind it, but no proof, so I invested in some security cameras to keep an eye on the car. Sure enough, the very next week, the cameras caught Karen in the act of dumping a bucket of paint stripper on the Impala's hood. I called the cops immediately and showed them the footage. They arrested Karen for vandalism and destruction of property. This time, when we faced off in court, it was Karen in the hot seat. The video evidence was damning. She tried to claim it was an accident, that she'd tripped while carrying cleaning supplies. The judge wasn't buying it. Karen ended up with a hefty fine, community service, and a restraining order barring her from coming near me or my car. She was also forced to step down from the Homeowner Association board. It was immensely satisfying to watch her leave the courtroom in disgrace. These days, the Impala sits unmolested in front of my parents' house. I take it for regular drives to keep it in good shape, just like my grandpa taught me. Sometimes I even cruise past Karen's house, giving a friendly wave as her face turns red with impotent rage. The whole ordeal was a headache, but in the end, justice prevailed. My grandpa's beloved car is safe, Karen got her comeuppance, and I learned the value of standing up for what's right, even when faced with bogus lawsuits and busybody neighbors. Every time I slide behind that Chevy's wheel, I think of my grandpa and smile, knowing he'd be proud that I fought to keep his legacy alive. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I enrolled in an Instagram contest giving my details in order to win a home security system. This was a bit dumb on my part, but the way their salespeople approached me was uncalled for. For weeks, I got called every hour, and when I picked up, they hung up. I blocked the number, and they started dialing me with another number. At some point, I finally got someone on the line, asked them politely to please don't call me again and remove my number. They didn't. I used to work in B2B sales and even in a B2C call center, so I generally am open to talking to sales. However, this dialer was set very aggressively. For those of you who don't know how call center dialers work, a system calls you first, and when you pick up, check if an agent is available. If no agent is available, they hang up. This is to keep agents busy as much as possible, at the expense of the people in the list. So because I got sick of their aggressive dialer method and they didn't remove my number, I wanted revenge. I looked up all the phone numbers of employees I could find, I'm quite good at this, and created my own list. In this list, I had the CEO, CFO, COO, VP Sales, VP Marketing, and all people, if could find in my country on LinkedIn. I didn't discriminate, interns, HR, legal, everyone with a LinkedIn profile I've added to my list. In comes my petty revenge. I've opened a clean VM, used a VPN, created a fake Instagram profile, and subscribed everyone in the 50-person list to the same Instagram contest. Just imagine some sales agent calling and hanging up the CEO of a global home security company multiple times for days only to be confronted with an annoyed boss of their boss's boss trying to pitch their services. Not to mention all the other employees I've added. They probably don't know it was me, and after a couple of weeks I learned you can block a range of phone numbers, after which the calling stopped. It's too bad I couldn't witness the calls myself, but I can imagine at some point they got some calls from employees who got sick of it and had to create a blacklist. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.